my grandma was the family historian and had a book. One of our relatives started keeping track of the family genealogy in the late 1800s, which meant that she was able to talk to her uncle Zach Cook, who had fought in the War of 1812. So we were able to get one branch of the family way back in time. It's been really quite a nice thing, to have that genealogical knowledge. I love working on it because I love history and really enjoy sort of the detective work that goes with genealogy. For today, the topic is called Searching with Confidence. And I knew that I wanted to offer a class that gave a way to talk about some of the things that you can do, some of the habits you can build, some of the techniques you can use in order to really feel like you are getting better and better at doing your family history research. And so that's really the genesis of this class. It's the third class in our current series. At the end, we'll talk about the next series that's coming up in June, July, and August. I'm going to jump right into the slideshow. When it comes to tonight's class, we are going to talk about some nitty-gritty in terms of techniques. But one of the things that I hope you all come away from this with is a sense of some ways that you can enhance your own attitude and habits to really make the family history search as enjoyable as possible. I want to tell you about my second great grandfather, Nathan Pratt Merrill. He was born in 1823 in New York State. We're not 100% sure where he was in the state he was born. He moved to Michigan. Parts of the family moved with him. Some of his siblings moved. When he died, he was in the town of Venice, which is in Shiawassee County in Michigan. Kind of, if you know that Michigan is shaped like a mitten, then Shiawassee County is right about here. And in doing my research, I ran across a plat map, which were in very common use in the late 18 and early 1900s. And it took a township, which is one of the measures. It's a 6-mile square area, part of a county. And in each township, it then showed who owned the property, what the acreage was. It generally showed where the house was on the property. It also showed once there were community schools, it showed where those school buildings were as well. When I got looking closer, I went over very carefully, and if you've not seen a plat map before, this might look very confusing, but there's actually a really easy way to search through it. Maybe maps will be another class that we do. And I found N.P. Merrill and his 80 acres right here. And then when I looked a little farther, I found Russell Andrews, who's my name ancestor. And I also I knew that Nathan's father was Jeremiah Caddy Merrill, and I found him as well. You can see that they're all relatively close to each other. So they would have known each other during that time period. Jeremiah Caddy Merrill I found some info on him, built out his genealogical data a little bit, including this land grant that not actually signed by Andrew Jackson, signed by a clerk for Andrew Jackson. And recently, when I was doing some more history, I took a look at and was able to push back on Jeremiah Caddy Merrill's parents. His mom was Lydia Caddy. It's not surprising, it's so common that one of the sons in the family will have the mother's maiden name as a middle name. Lydia is my fourth great grandmother. She was actually born in Plainfield, Connecticut. And I had not confirmed before this that I had Connecticut relatives, but wow, I was about to find out about a whole bunch of them. She actually came to Michigan in her older years, she and her husband. And in the south of Michigan, I'm used to thinking of my dad's side of the family in northern Michigan and my mom's side of the family in the Ypsilanti, Ann Arbor area. So it was kind of a surprise. I'm going to see if my brother will go visit this monument, which is, there was a old cemetery that was relocated essentially, and a memorial put up on ground that's now the Willow Run School District headquarters. But my family, who knows so much about our family history, didn't know about this memorial. And when I saw where it is, I've driven by there when I was still living in Michigan. I've driven by there dozens of times. Well, so Lydia's dad turned out to be a guy named Jeremiah Caddy. So not only was her son Jeremiah named after him, but then with the middle name. And it turned out Jeremiah was a bit of a guy in the Revolution. He was a major in a regiment of foot, which would be the infantry, the Massachusetts line in the Revolutionary War. Now, those of you who know something about gravestones will recognize that this is not an original gravestone. But when I was trying to find out more information, I was able to find through one of the connections at the, I use Ancestry.com for most of my search. One of the folks that also has Jeremiah Caddy as a ancestor had posted some links. And there was an article from a local paper about Jeremiah and one of his descendants. So one of my cousins, who I've never met and may never meet, had gotten together, and the Caddy's Hill and the Caddy burial ground, this little family plot. There's not a stone there for Jeremiah. They're not 100% sure where he's buried, but because he was a veteran, they were able to get this classic veteran's tombstone. And they had a whole celebration, the Sons of the American Revolution, which is an organization not too much different from the Daughters of the American Revolution, were there and had a ceremony that people attended in this tiny little town near in New York. He moved from Connecticut to Saratoga, New York. I was even able to push back one more generation to Jeremiah's parents. And maybe the next generation, it's still too iffy. I don't have it officially in my tree yet, but it was very exciting. This is something that I'll just be writing up and sending some photos to my immediate family. But this is the kind of thing, this is the kind of really fun thing that can make genealogy, all those hours that you might spend, all the rabbit holes you might go down. This is a whole thing that I knew nothing about until recently. And it was just because I was going in to kind of scrub some of that particular line and see what I had, see if what I had made sense. So when it comes to talking about searching with confidence, the three kind of pieces that I want to weave together tonight, one is some strategies for effective searches. Another is looking at record keeping options. Because whether you're primarily digital or lots of paper with some digital, keeping track of records can be an important piece of being able to search with confidence because you know what you've got already. And then lots of us, I just watched a friend who he's an older guy, very vigorous, and he'd only met his dad 5 times in his life. And I recently gave him a boost to get started. And he's found some relatives that he didn't know about. He's traced his line back. Well, one of the relatives has traced the line back to 1610. So I talked with him about proof he'll have to get since there's so few records back at that time period. But he basically is just searching and doesn't have goals at the moment. At some point, it's going to help him to set some goals. I've had to remind him to get up from his chair, be sure he's drinking lots of water, make sure he has a snack in the evening when he's doing his research, because it's so exciting. And sometimes in the excitement, it feels easy to go without having goals set, but that can make a real difference for not only your satisfaction, but the progress that you make. So as we're talking about things tonight, some of you probably also already have some of the characteristics I'm talking about when I'm about to talk about mindset. But I would really encourage you, especially if you have limited experience with genealogy, I would really encourage you to kind of think about the items I'm going to propose to you. Research skills are important, but one set of things that's really important is to maintain your curiosity. When you're looking through and trying to prove things, it can be easy to think of it as work. But let your curiosity work for you, not only about what you're seeing in some of the documents, but about why people might have done something. Saratoga was a pretty nice place. Why did Lydia Caddy and Gad Merrill and their adult children get up and move to Michigan a year or two after Michigan became a state when it was still mostly wilderness? What about that made it sound like a good idea? I'd encourage you to be flexible. One example would be when you're researching a line and either you realize you're getting really tired of the people you're researching, or maybe you've hit a brick wall and you're coming at it all the different ways you can. Sometimes, and you may have had this experience, stepping away from it can be one of the most important things you can do. Flexible is also a characteristic that I think of when I think of sort of having a rethink about what you're researching, what your expectations are, what your knowledge is. Sometimes you need to step out of the genealogy and do some reading or some internet searches to understand what was going on in that place at that time, wherever in the country, wherever in the world it was. It's also, most of the time when people are doing genealogy research, they are very engaged. And so that may not be an issue for you at all. But if you start noticing that things are becoming rote, that you're just checking things to check things, if you feel like you're becoming an ancestor hoarder and just adding people for the sake of adding, again, this would be one of those moments that you could step back a little bit and think about, who are these people? Why am I doing the research in the first place? Is it because you want to see life lessons? Is it because you just want to know who was the father or mother of who? All of those are good, but being curious, flexible, and engaged is really helpful as a base mindset. And again, sometimes you need to look at things with fresh eyes, or you need to let it rest. One way, I guess, fresh eyes can also include, when I start to, like when I started to put together the little short family story that I'm going to send to my family about Jeremiah Caddy, Major Jeremiah Caddy, I realized there were some pieces that I didn't have. How long was Jeremiah Caddy Merrill in the Ypsilanti area before he headed up north? What's the timing when he headed up north? There were some pieces of the story that I didn't have to tell them yet. And writing it down or telling my spouse about it is one way that fresh eyes, fresh ears. The other piece is the let it rest. I am going back to one of my brick wall lines right now, and I haven't been working on it with energy for a while. And I'm going to show a couple of the ways that paid some dividends for me, opening up new areas to search today. Because just in the last couple of days, I made some, gosh, why did I think that was true? Discoveries. So letting it rest can be helpful. The last piece is what their questions. What was it like? You know, why would they do that? What else was going on at that time? The more one does family history, the more one is likely to want to find out these answers. If you're not already thinking about it, you know, some of the things that you can learn in doing the context and doing the background for family research can make a real difference for the enjoyment of that research. When it comes to the actual techniques, you know, you usually want to, especially if you're new to genealogy, it's okay to start simple. And I'm talking about with people. You know, the names, the dates, the locations, the relatives. Sometimes when you're doing a search at any website and you fill out every single thing you know, you may not get any answers back. And you might know for sure that there's information about that person. But it can be one of the best things you can do with a new person you're learning about or revisiting someone is do the search and have the minimum amount of details in that first round of searching. I did a quick search today. I plucked the name out of my past, Lyman Briggs, who I knew was a resident of Michigan. And I just did a search. I didn't put in a date. I didn't put in a spouse. I didn't put in a death date. I just did a search. And I got some interesting stuff back for Lyman Briggs in Michigan. When I looked at the list, I was sort of intrigued by the Lyman Briggs and Son in this tax assessment list. So I popped in to look at it. And sure enough, in this very classically written, beautifully done record book, here's Lyman Briggs and Son. And this Lyman Briggs was a peddler of the 4th class. So it meant he was a merchant but didn't have a fixed store. There were lots of merchants that went out and about by foot or by wagon to rural communities. So that was an interesting thing to see. Let me also point out, if you see this word right here, one of the classes that we're going to do this summer is about deciphering old writing. And what looks like an F here is actually a part of a double S. One of the reasons I know this makes a difference is that my great-grandfather, multiple great-grandfather Russell, who was on that plat map, there are people who have his information who are not very closely related to the Andrews line, and they have him in as Rufus because the double S, this was a standard way to do a double S, and it's different than an F. We'll talk about that more in the class this summer, but you get to the point where you're able to just take this in your stride, 4th class. All right, so I was pretty sure that this was not the Lyman Briggs that I'd been thinking of. I went to Michigan State for my undergrad and my half a master's degree. And I worked for the residence hall staff, and there was a residential college in one of the halls that I worked in, the Lyman Briggs College. And I knew that Lyman Briggs was a scientist because the residential college was focused around science. So I did a little more noodling around, and I came up with the right Lyman Briggs. Now, this is the 1930 census. This is the District of Columbia. In 1930, right? So we're talking about a time period in line with the Great Depression. When you look at the value, this column here is the value of the home. And you see these folks with the $15,000, $30,000, $20,000. This was not a depressed neighborhood. And Lyman Briggs, it turns out, was actually he described himself as doing scientific research and for the US government. He was actually in charge of the Bureau of Standards for the government. And his wife, Catherine Briggs, I saw the daughter's name listed and her name, and I thought, why do I know that? And it turns out, if any of you have ever taken the Myers-Briggs type indicator test, that Catherine Briggs and her daughter, Isabel Briggs Myers, were the ones who developed that inventory. And I used to, when I went to Michigan State, I worked in the residence hall. We used Myers-Briggs all the time. So you just never know what you're going to find when you're researching. Now, my biggest point was start with something simple. That initial search had just a first name, a last name, and a state. It didn't even have a date. It's also often helpful to start really if you're new to genealogy, or if you're researching a new line, you can start really broad. You can look at all the collections in the database. You can look at all of the sources and see what turns up. If you find a few pieces and start to understand where your relative may have lived and some of those other pieces of information, or if you know bits about that, then you can narrow some of it down. You might get to a point where you're just looking at the 1850 census in a particular state, for example. But often starting broad is the way to go. The other piece of an effective search is you want to start close to you and work your way back. If you start down a line and you realize that you've got something wrong or that things are not making sense, then you're going to want to come back to the last thing you knew that was true, closer to you, rework that, and then go ahead and work your way out from there. Never pick a person and start working forward from that. If you think you're related to Sir Francis Drake, so are multiple thousands of other people. And it's much harder to try to find your connection to Drake that way than to just work the line that you think is related to Drake and keep going back. All right, let's talk a bit about keeping records. And my coworkers, my two tiny coworkers, are getting a little restive. So if you hear some barking, I may have to treat them at some point to keep them happy. It comes with the working at home part of the job. You know, keeping records are one of those things that this again is part of the mindset. I did part of getting ready for this seminar is I went and looked at a lot of books. I looked at a lot of websites. I looked at a lot of YouTube channels, videos, to see what people were suggesting in terms of keeping records. Was there anything new? Were there any proprietary things? And it seems like most of the videos that are out there right now talk a lot about paper records. Some of them talk about digital records. And most of the videos are doing, and books are kind of doing best practices in a way that my bet is more than 50% of us are spending time feeling embarrassed about our record keeping because it's sort of like Martha Stewart, right? If Martha Stewart did genealogy, we might all aspire to do it like Martha Stewart in terms of keeping records, but most of us wouldn't. And so when it comes to keeping records, one thing that I felt like other folks really weren't addressing is most of the record keeping seemed to relate to having things in an order that you could produce a family history book, or that you could sit down with a relative and share the entire story of a family or the entire story of an individual. That's a perfectly reasonable thing to try to do, but it's a little bit different than maintaining the records that you're working on a day-by-day basis when you're working on a particular research project. And so sort it out a little bit in your own mind. You may have a really different approach to the records that you're using on a daily or monthly basis to do some of your research versus the finished product that you're trying to produce to share with family once we're able to have family reunions again. So, and also think about what kind of things are you trying to manage? Is it paper items? You know, did you just inherit your great aunt's 50 years of genealogical research and it's in 14 banker's boxes? Or is this you starting and nobody else in the family has helped out yet? What kind of paper, how much? What are you doing about digital stuff? Do you have copies of family records, copies of your tree on a digital format? Have you backed it up? In the same way that any kind of paper or tangible product needs some care, all of your digital products need some care. It makes a difference. Are you talking about text or documents? Is this a story someone wrote up and shared with you? Or is it an original document, perhaps your grandmother's marriage certificate? Or are we talking about photos? What kind of photos from what time period? Are they original photos? Are they copies? Are they photos on done through a word processor or a photo manipulator that you just printed on regular paper? What if you've got some kind of research aids? I have some ways when I'm trying to untangle things in a particular family line. There are some forms I use, but there are also some freehand research aids that I use to just sort things out enough. And those go in a particular place. It's different than my documents, for example. Have you got reference books? I'm a book lover. I work for a library. Stop me buying books, somebody. I have all sorts of reference books. Now, some reference books are general information about doing genealogy. Some might be a specialty area of genealogy. Some of them might be family histories. Each of those might need different care. If you use any kind of planners or trackers for your research, then those too might be done in a different way. And then if you're more of a scattered notes type person, that might look a bit different than you know, your 3x5 cards or your sticky notes might also get handled in a different way. The other thing is when you're keeping records, are you the kind of person that needs things visible, or do you prefer to have things put away? I came to the conclusion some number of years ago that I am one of those who's a stacker. I have lots and lots of file folders, but the stuff I'm working on right now is in stacks on my desk. A couple years ago, my completely lovely AmeriCorps fellow, when I was out sick for a week, went over my desk and got everything into neat stacks, which completely destroyed my tracking system. Yes, things were in piles, but I could lay my hand on anything I needed. Whereas for her, those stacks, those piles, just made her itchy, and so she helped me, um, and I couldn't I couldn't be mad at her. So, think about what your actual style is. If I asked you what your kitchen cupboards look like right now, how sorted are they? How about your closet? Think about the kinds of things that you do already for organizing, and that can help sort of mentally prepare yourself for what you're willing to do, and how high you want to aspire. One of the things that is most important is just to get started. Whether, okay, this is not the kind of stacking that I'm talking about. I would find this difficult to work with. Lots of people would not even come into the room again. We can only hope it works for for this person. This, on the other hand, I don't think I'll ever have a desktop that looks this clean. But I know people who are able to do that, whose desktop is clean at the end of the day, making it easy to come in the next time they're sitting down for some genealogy. When you think about organizing, one of the most common things, the paper products, one of the most common things that people talk about are either binders or file folders or other kinds of paper protectors. Let me back up one step. When you are organizing genealogy records and dividing the family up into manageable bites, one of the most common ways that people do it is to take the 4 grandparents of yourself or whoever you're researching and use those as the basis for the organizing. And from there, everything can start to make some sense. If you are just researching one person in the family, then you might, you're going to start with that person and just have a binder about them. But typically, folks would separate the lines with the 4 grandparents, and then when it comes to parents and children, another very common way is that when someone gets married, they get their own either file folder or section within a binder, typically labeled with both last names. And then everything goes in there for themselves and their children until a point where the children either are married or are, if they choose not to marry, which is more common today, then it would be they're out on their own or self-supporting. And at that point, then a new folder, a new section of the binder is created. If it's a marriage, then it's the 2 last names, and that couple's children are in the binder or in the folder until they in turn go on. Now, some folks also, anything before the person is married stays in the parents folder. Other folks leave it in the parents folder and make another copy in the married couples folder. When you think about the amount of paper you want to handle, you get to make that decision. How many things do you want to print up? How much ink and how much paper do you want to use? If you set the internal rule for yourself that everything is in the parents folder until the child is married, then that if you need something from that person's youth, you would look at the parents folder. If you prefer to make the double copies and then everything's in one place, that's fine. But just be ready for the idea that you'll have more folders. It can start to really build up to a lot of pieces of paper. If someone had 8 children and you have a copy in the adults file and then a copy for each of the children, that can start to explode the amount of paper that you're managing. You'll hear folks talk about D-ring binders as opposed to the regular binders. One of the reasons that this can be important, and you see it at this angle, is that when the book is closed, this is straight up and down. So all of the pieces of paper have the same amount of room. When you have a regular ring binder, then the things that are in the very middle of it have more room, and the things on the edges have less. So D-ring binders are more expensive. It's harder to get them in narrower sets, but it's an investment that may be worth it for your purposes to help preserve some of the paper documents. I will mention in this particular photo that things have been 3-hole punched, and I'm not seeing, this might be something that's in a paper protector. If genealogy research is something that you plan to do long term, and if it's something that you're going to pass on to people, then I encourage you to look into the 3-ring plastic paper protectors as an option in order to protect documents. You might remember from school days that it's not unusual that things that are hole punched, at some point they're going to tear and may fall out. Now, you won't have punched any of your original documents, but it can still be a little harder to keep papers in good order if you've hole punched into the documents themselves. So some people go for color for separating if they're doing the 4 generations or the 4 lines. Some people prefer for everything to look uniform. That really is up to you, both for the binders and for the file folders. The one thing I'd suggest that you think about on your file folders, if you use paper labels, over time the glue will let go and the labels will fall off. If you're using the standard manila folders, you can and using pencil to label, then they're easy to reuse, easy to label, easy to reuse. If you're confident of your labels, go ahead and write in pen. It's much more difficult to see pencil. Even pen sometimes is difficult to see on the colored file folders. So there's some trade-offs there for you, but whether to use color or not is really up to you. Are you a person who visually color is helpful? Then go for it. If you're not, there's a price difference, there's a convenience difference between manila folders and colored folders. The manufacturer may discontinue a color. You may no longer be able to, especially if you pick the specialty color that was popular a certain year. If you can't find purple folders anymore, what would your choice be? So those are some small things to consider. There are many places, and I pulled up the Library of Congress just as an example. There are many places that can help you understand what to do to help preserve paper. A lot of the documents, old documents that are hard to read, sometimes it's the quality of the paper, sometimes it's the quality of the ink. Sometimes they were stored in a way that did not help them. Now, you don't have to set your home up as a museum in order to learn a lot of things about how to better take care of paper. And again, if this is a hobby, you can do it at a hobby level. But it doesn't, I really encourage you just to give a read to, whether it's the Library of Congress or one of the other organizations that can help you understand what happens with paper and how best to take care of it. There are some supplies that are available. There are some boxes you can get that you can put a number of documents into to help take care of. there are some very expensive ways you can take care of things. If you have a treasured item from the American colonial era, you know, that's over 200 years old, you may not have your copy of your grandparents', you know, marriage certificate in a specialty holder, but you might have that document from, you know, 250 years ago in a special holder. So you're the one who gets to kind of um, take some decisions about how you're going to care for things. You don't have to do everything at the tip top level if that's not your interest and it's not in your budget. But you know, you can do a little bit of a kind of a triage of what's going to make something worth taking more care of it. So really, what's realistic for you in regards to organization? Some organization is better than none. You know, this file cabinet, I think we got it for about $30. There's a limit to the number of file folders I can put in it, and I have to pull the drawers out in a specific kind of way to make it work. But I really didn't want to spend, it's easy to spend $150 on a file cabinet, and that I was not interested about that. The cabinet next to it is one I got from IKEA that has all kinds of miscellaneous supplies in it. It's just too small for paper, but everything else goes in there. So, you know, start with something simple. It might just be sorting. If you don't have the wherewithal to get a hold of file folders, to buy a file cabinet, to buy binders at, you know, $5 or $6 a pop, get the paper sorted and pick a safe place. Maybe you clean out one of your dresser drawers. Maybe there's a shelf in a closet that nobody else has access to. You know, sort things into, again, you can use the 4 grandparents. If you do some sorting, even if you hate sorting, if you get it sorted into the 4 grandparent piles, then when you need to find that paper, you only have to go through a quarter of the stack instead of going through 100% of what you've got. You know, get started, add more things as you can afford it, as you have time, as you have energy, and learn how to preserve items better. You know, that snapshot from 1870, 100 years from now, what are people going to do? You know, not only to see that, but to see photos that you've taken. So what's going to help? As kind of a general never rule, it's better not to hole punch items, documents, even copies of things if you can help it. I'm not going to stop you if your preference is to have them hole punched and not have them in the paper protectors. That's definitely okay, definitely up to you. But in general, it's harder on things when they're hole punched. For long-term storage, no paper clips and no staples. They go rusty, they'll mark things. Sometimes they disintegrate in a way that actually takes, you know, damages the item, and it's difficult to get rid of. There are things that can be damaging, like tape, like glue. Some items like newspaper clippings, glue can actually accelerate the decomposition, but those can sometimes be dealt with or can be minimized. Probably avoid some of the irreversible things like laminating. If you laminate a family document and the lamination doesn't last and the plastic degrades, then you've lost that document. Typically, you'd want to have copies of originals in the binders or in the folders. Even with the D-ring binders, it's a bit better to lay the binders flat, puts less stress, because when the papers are upright and the plastic is upright, they're going to slump. And then digitize whenever possible. There's lots of scanning options. You can buy a flatbed scanner. I have a scanning app on my phone that works just fine. But digitize things wherever possible. That also makes it easier to share with family members or other people who are interested. When it comes to digital things, back it up. If you think about the amount of time and energy that you've put into scanning photos, if you think about the amount of time and energy that's gone into creating your family tree document, what happens if your computer or your laptop goes down? What happens if you lay it aside for a couple of years and you come back and that operating system is no longer operating? So back things up. There are great webinars on how to back up things that are digital. I don't pretend to cover that right now. I and everybody else am emphasizing back it up. I live riskily all the time and don't back up as often as I should. And if I ever lose things, it's going to be exactly on me. It can help if you ask, can you replace this? What would it take to replace this item? Are you going to be as happy with a copy of your grandparents' marriage certificate as you are with the original? How much is it going to cost? Some things can be replaced, but the cost is ridiculous. How much time and money and effort went into finding or creating whatever it is in the first place? If you think about the amount of time that you spend doing research and adding people to your digital tree, and you don't have any kind of a copy of it, how many hours do you want to spend recreating that tree? And finally, do you care if you lose it? If that thing goes away forever, is it worth the energy to try to take care of? All right, so managing your paper pile and your digital gems is an important piece of being able to search effectively. If you can find things, then you don't have to go look at them again. If you can find things, then you know what you've got before you go on to the next thing. Sort of the final piece I want to tackle tonight in terms of searching with confidence is how to leverage search goals. I sit down all the time without a single goal and I just start working the hints on my family tree. And sometimes that's really fun. But if I'm going to spend any amount of time, or when I get to one of the tangles, where there are kids who are older than their parents, or where someone's attached to a tree that doesn't make sense. It was supposed to be attached with, Jacob Heiser Jr. as their parent, not Jacob Heiser Sr. Then having some goals can help you be more focused and get more done. Why should you bother? Well, I ask you, do you have more time for research than you have research to do? I don't know anyone who does family history research and has more time on their hands than they have research to do. So given that time is limited, whether that's this day, this month, or this lifetime, things you can do to make your search more efficient and effective are going to help you. And setting up some simple search goals is one way to do that. It's a good habit to be in. When we were still able to walk into a Starbucks, place an order, hang out, I would usually, while I was waiting for my iced tea, no syrup, I would bring up my Ancestry app and just process a bunch of hints. My goal each of those times, if you wanted to find one for me, was how many can I process in 5 minutes? Really, I didn't have a goal, but I could have. There were times where I would only process hints for a selected line of the family. So there's a goal. Even when you're just filling time, you can still have a little bit of a goal about it. And even an informal goal can help. When I was working on the caddy line, I love Post-it notes and have all kinds of colors and sizes. And I just wrote out, my goal was to sort out the caddy ancestors. Um, that's not very specific because I was doing a broad grab, but when I started down the line of one of the caddy children's wife's mother's father-in-law, I could bring myself back from that. He sounds like an interesting guy. I've got a place I write down the interesting people I want to go back to. But knowing that I was focused on the caddy ancestors helped me make overall better use of that time. There are a number of ways to set research goals for genealogy. I want to introduce you to one. It's one of the books that I like the most. And there are many books out there. You don't have to like this one. You don't have to like the style. I found it super helpful as a way to get myself focused. And have something more than sort out the caddy ancestors. To get started, the basic idea is, and this is all in her book, and I've simplified the language a little bit. Basically, look over your family tree and pick a question you'd like to answer. This may be when you're feeling like you want to go a different direction. This may be when you've been spending a lot of time on a particular branch of the family and you've gathered everybody you can gather, but you don't think you've got everything you can find and you don't think you've got everything correct. The next thing is she talks about developing a research objective, which is basically the specifics of the goal plus the info that you have. And then write it down. Have it somewhere. And, I know some people who have Post-it notes or 3x5 cards up on the wall in front of them. I know other people who keep a notebook and they have the page where they're doing research. They're just using page after page in like a blank notebook that they're filling in. But write it down. Wherever you're going to put it, write it down. One of the things that Diana and Nicole point out is that there's usually three kinds of objectives when you're doing genealogy research. One is to identify an individual. She uses an example where in the mid 1800s in the small rural area in Georgia or Alabama where her relatives were, there were three men of roughly the same age with the same last name, not related to each other. And she needed to figure out which one of those was the father of the person she knew for sure was in her line. Proving a family relationship is another way. Is there a kid that's in the wrong place? Is there a spouse? I've attached spouses that didn't belong to someone. They were married to someone with a similar name, but not the right name. It's also to discover what she calls ancestor actions. What could I find on Jeremiah Caddy's service in the Revolutionary War? Did he take a bounty? Did he get a pension? Did the pension help his family? So those are the sort of three general areas that the objectives fall into. So, you can give it a try. One example that I would use, Russell Andrews, who's on this township map for Burns Township in Shiawassee County, Michigan. His parents, we know that his father, to all intents and purposes, it looks like his father was named Lorenzo Dow Andrews. We have very limited information about Lorenzo, but the biggest thing I want to know is who were the parents of Lorenzo Dow Andrews. When we first found out about Lorenzo Dow Andrews as Russell's parent, I was excited because, again, often a middle name on a son is a maiden name of the mom. So here's maybe a whole new clue. And then I found out that around the time that Lorenzo was born, which was around 1800, there was a very charismatic preacher making his way up and down the east coast of the country and making a big impression on people. And so if you search for any relative named Lorenzo Dow, fill in the last name, you will find a whole lot of Lorenzo Dows, Lorenzo Dow Smith, Lorenzo Dow Jones, Lorenzo Dow. So Dow probably is useless. So what do I know about Lorenzo? So the objective of my research is to find the parents of Lorenzo Dow Andrews. What I know about Lorenzo is that he was born about 1800 in the New York region. There's some family lore that he was born in the area where New York and Vermont touch, and that's right about the time that they were having battles about where the state line was. And he apparently died before 1850 because in the 1850 census, his wife Premilia is listed as a widow. We know he was a father to 5 children, all born in New York. So that's my objective. Who are the parents of Lorenzo Dow Andrews? Now there are lots of different things I'm going to try to do to work that line, and it'll involve many usual genealogical approaches. But I've got a reason, I've got a goal that I'm going to use. So, give it a try. Consider what you know about the person, about their siblings, about their friends, their associates, their neighbors, and see what you can find out. So again, kind of the bottom line for me with a lot of the search stuff is, do you have more time for research than you have research to do? If not, I am hopeful that many of the things we talked about today will prove useful for you. My biggest hope is that you will use or revive the mindset, especially the curiosity piece. I work for a library and I care about resources. So one of the things I want to point out, there are a number of lovely books. If you're a book person, most of these books are available either in a tangible printed version or by Kindle or other app. These are just for examples related to doing research. Research Like a Pro, we talked about already. The Drew Smith is pretty well known in genealogy teaching, and he had some great resources at the Roots Tech Connect this year. Organize your genealogy, how to archive family photos. I included genealogy standards because the more you learn about genealogy by doing, the more you're going to want to learn about genealogy standards. These are standards that have been established so that people who are professionals in the field can be credentialed as having certain skill sets. Even if you don't want to grow up to be a professional genealogist, understanding the best practices can be helpful. Do you know what it takes to actually prove something about a relative? If you've got a line that goes back to 1610, how do you know that it really goes back that far? When as soon as you start doing research, you find out that pre-1750, depending on where you are in the world, there either are lots of resources or not so many resources, and actual documentation. So those are some examples of books. There are a number of Facebook groups. I follow the Organized Genealogist. I also follow some that are like the Genealogy Squad. This one I mention in particular because it's got 4 people who are pretty well known in genealogical research. And if you don't know Cindy's list, you need to add it to your repertoire. And they host this Facebook space they try to keep it very positive, and they help people understand more about reliable methods of research. Now, these are just 2 of the examples of Facebook pages. If you do Facebook, even if you don't do Facebook, it might be worth doing it just for the genealogy pages. If you search Facebook by genealogy groups, a whole bunch of groups will come up. Some of them, I have many relatives stayed or came through New York State. So I found a New York State genealogy research group that might be of no interest to someone whose family came, in the early 1700s from Spanish Mexico, right? There are specialty genealogy groups all over the place. There are also, if you go to YouTube, I just did a quick search today to pull up, genealogy notebook organization. There are a ton of people who have great videos on YouTube. Some of them are kind of just choose a few topics. One of my favorite hasn't posted anything in a year, but I've saved some of his older ones. A couple that I really like, both Ancestry, Family Search, I think MyHeritage, some of the other common genealogy research sites have YouTube channels. Some of them have more postings, some of them have less. But there's also, I get a lot out of Genealogy TV is one that I've enjoyed. She covers good topics. Lisa Louise Cook's Genealogy Gems is another one that I've really enjoyed. And again, the barefoot genealogist at Ancestry, the folks at Family Search, they all have lots of different, and some of them are very specific, some of them are very broad. So it's a great way to get some education for not much money. Let me mention, and Lowell either has already posted or will be posting, our next set of classes is coming up in June, July, and August. I did not. So the one in June, it's one that we've done before, called Getting Started, and especially if you or someone you know is brand new to genealogy, it's kind of an overview and introduction on how to get started on doing your family genealogy. The It's All Relative is July 14th. And that's what it sounds like. If you're not sure what a third half cousin twice removed is, but they're in your chart, we can help you with that. And the last one is one that I find a great deal of fun. It's Deciphering Old Writing, and that is in August. And that one will be looking, like the example of Russell that looks like Rufus. I was reading a probate record from 1775 the other day, and there are some words I can't recognize, but I was super happy that I read my way through essentially the entire document. It made me very happy to be able to do that. So I don't guarantee you can read a document at the end of the class, but it will have you well on your way. There's one other resource I want to show you quite quickly. It's a very amazing resource that's available for a short amount of, well, it's available for a long amount of time. So Roots Tech Connect is one of the best known genealogy conferences in the country. It's held in Salt Lake City in February each year. And because of COVID, they were not able to hold it this year, and they really doubled down on being able to, they were not able to hold it in person. They really doubled down on providing a great free value to the genealogy community. They were in a position, there are some genealogy conferences that are going on and virtually and still cost money. But this site has, when I printed up the list of classes so I could go over them before this started in February, it was 18 pages long, essentially single spaced list. The thing to do is, if you don't already have a free membership at Family Search, you want to get that established, because then when you come in, you can set up a playlist So you can go through, you can search the sessions, and then put the ones you're interested in on your playlist and have that available. All the classes were pre-recorded. Some of them are as short as a couple of minutes. Ancestry had a whole series of like 1-minute tutorials. Others of them, I just sat through an hour-and-a-half one about handwriting. So it's the whole range. It's every topic in genealogy you can imagine. And they have what's called the Guide Me, which is a curated set of suggested things, suggested sessions to see. It includes getting started. So if you're new to genealogy, each of these series has a number of episodes that go with it, and they've curated the entire series for you. Different topics: getting started, using family search, using ancestry, using MyHeritage. What about DNA? If you're a Mormon, they have specific things for you. They have some for youth and young adults. So, you know, even if you're feeling like 18 pages single spaced is a bit much to work your way through, they do have a set. And the amazing thing is that this is going to be available until next February. So you've got, 10 more months. You could practically become, you could learn all the things you want to learn from this. It's such a valuable resource. And I encourage you. It's Roots Tech. It's at Family Search, but if you put Roots Tech 2021 in any search engine, it'll get you there. And by having your Family Search membership, then you can create the playlist. I believe they let you in to see some things individually, but you can't keep track of what you've watched, and you can't save things to watch again. So it's worth creating the Family Search membership. All right, Lowell, shall we go on to questions?
Yes, and actually right before questions, now that kind of everybody has had an idea, whether you're old or new to genealogy, we do have a poll, a second poll that we want to put up, because we kind of want to have an idea of where everybody is in genealogy world. Now, the thing about it is, don't worry about whatever definition any of these choices are. It's kind of like, how do you feel about your place in genealogy? So I'm going to have a poll up. Like for myself, I would call myself as some experience. I dabble in it. Yeah, don't feel like you have to be so committed to what how you're answering. It's just, what do you feel comfortable with? Okay, so we're about 2 minutes. 90. So we have 95%. We have 2 people who did not answer, but that's okay. That's okay. So I'm going to end the poll now. Here's some results if you are all curious. So I see a lot of people are in the same place with me. Okay, so I have been jotting down, I've been reading the chat along the way. So very, very, very early on, when you were showing the slide about the plat maps, Ms. Darlene had asked the question pretty quickly that, do you know if California ones are available? Because I believe you're showing Michigan, correct?
I was showing Michigan. I am not sure, not every state did plat maps, and not every collection has been digitized.
Okay.
So it's a little spotty. Like, I wasn't able to find some of my New York locations. Okay. But Michigan farmland, it was a super common thing.
So definitely something that everybody just kind of has to look at your place, search to see if that's available for your particular area.
Yeah, whatever research site you're using will usually have some information about maps. And so if you're using Family Search, if you're using Ancestry, you can look at maps. You can look at what were called gazetteers. There are also a number of historic map sites online, including the Library of Congress. Obviously, there's not maps for every single place, but I was looking up some maps from the early 1800s for some of my New York crowd. in the Palatine Bridge near Stone Arabia in New York State, and found some old maps that were digitized and online. So just search, go search.
Okay. So another thing that was brought up when you were talking about style and organizing, we did have a couple suggestions if people were not able to see the chat during the presentation. Ms. Darlene and Linda, they had some suggestions. One of them was possibly making your files by family surnames. Kathy was talking about, maybe taking your grandparents and making a file for each of them. One suggestion was possibly family surnames. Another one was also by document type. So, like say, for example, if you're getting a lot of birth certificates for all of your cousins, maybe sort it by the document type. And this was a really good suggestion. I didn't really think about this one before. Ms. Darlene said for storage, Kathy has shown, a file cabinet she had gotten for really cheap. She suggested going on places like Nextdoor or, looking at like local social media. Like I know Facebook has their marketplace for local people. That's a good place to look for low cost ways. A lot of people might be getting rid of a file cabinet or, that sort of thing, that instead of going to having to buy a new one that might be a lot more expensive, check locally. People might be getting rid of some sort of sorting furniture that you can use at a much cheaper price, and if not free. Okay, and then another question that we had, when you were talking about your phone, you said in particular that you do have an app on your phone that scans. So Ms. Darlene was asking, what app is that? I don't remember hearing you mention specifically what it was called.
I didn't, because there are a number of apps available. I use Adobe Scan. Let me see if I can.
Is it free or is it a paid?
It's free. That's why I use it.
Oh, okay.
I'm working from home. My team needs to get requisitions signed by me, so they attach them to an email. I print them, sign them, scan them, zip them back to them. I can also use it for genealogy related things. And I see Cam Scanner, somebody mentions Genius Scan. So there are a number that are available out there.
And another thing, I kind of had a question on, I was hoping to look it up really quick, but you went on to the next slide. It was kind of brought up, resources. You did show some resources, some books on there. And is it possible, if whether it's you or if you want me to look it up, the books that you've shown pictures of, are those things available in the library, whether to be checked out for Hoopla or Overdrive? I do know in particular the first book you were showing, that is a reference book, so it would not be able to be checked out. But again, when our library opens, it would be something that someone could come in and use. So is it possible to get a list of those reference books so we can kind of give it to the public so they have an idea of what's available here?
Yes, I've got a document that I started putting together called Resource Examples, because again, I want you to search for things that work for you. And I believe the 4 books that I showed are available at the library. Luella is right, some are available for checkout, others might be the only copy that we have. We're not sure we can replace it, so it's made a reference copy you can come into the library and use. Depending on where in the country you are, and what if you're not in the local Salinas area, many libraries do interlibrary loan, and it's possible to get a hold of copies of books that your individual library doesn't have. There's sometimes a small charge because it takes a fair amount of administrative time to find it, order it from the other library, receive it, give it to you, get it back from you, process it, get it back to the original library, they check it in. So even when there's a couple of bucks charged to do the search for an item through interlibrary loan, it's worth looking at.
Okay, another one that was brought up in Family Search. Roots Tech, who I guess is done by Family Search, and you said to sign up with Family Search. Is that a paid site or is it free?
No, that's the great advantage of Family Search. It's completely free. Their goal is to make a worldwide tree that has everybody that existed on it. And so they are happy to have more people joining them. If you are not in a position to spend money on any of the paid sites, then Family Search is probably your best bet. Even if you use the paid sites, it never hurts to be on Family Search, because you may be contacted by somebody who thinks they're related and is using Family Search. So yeah, it's completely free. Put a little bit of your tree in there. You'll probably find people are already in there from your tree, since it's a shared tree, as opposed to the paid sites. Your tree is your tree. Even if people can view it publicly, they can't come in and edit it. But at Family Search, everybody who's in there is shared essentially. So, but yeah, it's a reliable place. They have access to many, if not all, of the same resources. They're a little bit better. We have many of our community members are from Spanish-speaking heritage families, and Family Search has lots of great, especially for Mexico. In Monterey County, 90% of the folks who are Spanish-speaking are from Mexico. In other counties in the state, it's a much more diverse point of origin. But yeah, Family Search has lots of great things. Forms, they have a lot of resource materials. They have a lot of, they can teach you a lot of things. So.
Okay, and then another one, Linda D has brought up a couple times at the beginning and later on at the end. In the chat, she does have a link to a calendar with webinars that she says are most of them are free. So if anybody wants to scroll in your chat and is looking kind of like, on your own, different webinars to watch or see, I guess. I have not looked it up myself. She is posting this for everybody. So, again, use with caution. There are a lot, well, I have to say, definitely, there are a lot of really kind things people were saying. For people who are starting out, like kind of thank you for showing us this before, they kind of went and spent a bunch of money. And Glenda G, she did say the National Archives also has maps. So people who are asking about maps.
Well, let me interrupt you for 1 second. I want to grab, while folks are still here, we've got Shelley McFadden, who is part of the board of the Monterey County Genealogical Society here. Shelley, do you want to take a moment just to give people a quick overview of what MoCo Genso does with the monthly meetings, et cetera, et cetera?
We try to present programs that are helpful from beginning to advance on genealogy. We try to focus on websites, any way to give utilities or some kind of tools to help you do your genealogy. We also have a website, mocogenso.org. That's M-O, I'll put it on the chat, which is a great website for resources and what's happening or what conferences are around the United States. But we try to do local as well as across the United States information available, new updates and changes to what's available to everyone. So we meet once a month, except for the month of July, on the first Thursday of the month. And so that's what we're up to. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks, Shelley. Okay, Luell, any other questions to wrap up with?
Yes. Well, this one, I'm not absolutely sure if this is something you want to address outside of this specific session. But Joan D, they do say they have enlisted records for the Civil War and asked where would I post them for families to find. I wasn't sure, Joan, are you talking about something for us to post for you, or are you asking like in general, like do I go on Ancestry and post it there? I'm not really absolutely sure. So well, I don't know, Kathy. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm not really sure where to post them. It's something that I found in my great-grandparents' things. And it's young men of the ages 16, 17, and 18 who enlisted in the Civil War. Some of them I can read, some of them I cannot. But I thought, what if a family is looking for a child that fought in the Civil War and has nothing on them? Where would I post these so that people could find them?
Are they for a specific geographic region?
I think a lot of them in the Illinois area. That's where my grandparents were from. So
it might be worth a quick check. An internet search would probably show whether there are any historical societies in that area. and there may be historical societies, there may be a library in the region that would be interested in connecting with that information.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay. And another comment that we had from Dora, how do I get information back on ancestry that they lost? I don't know, Kathy, if this is something you want to address at this time, or if this is more of a, you might have to go to Ancestry's help engine to figure that one out. And also too, just in case, once we started this Q&A, a lot of chat started popping up after the fact. So, anybody, if you guys want to scroll through it, a lot of people are giving some really good suggestions. Like Dorothy has also suggested maybe reinforcement tabs for paper and using acid-free protectors. So definitely, take a scroll on there. If you guys are looking for different ways to do things, people are, really just kind of bringing up all the different suggestions and questions at this very moment. But in particular, Kathy, so this question about ancestry, is this something that you want to address at this time or maybe in a later date?
I would say it's if something's gone wrong with some of the information or gaining access to it, the folks at Ancestry on the helplines will do everything within their power because they know how important it is to people. And so I would use either, start a conversation via their contact us form, or they may have a phone number easily accessible. Like when I had to change what level I was paying with them, I spoke to an actual living human being. And so, a lot of the genealogy sites recognize that this is very important to people on all kinds of different levels. So I would recommend going right to them and see if they can help you about it.
Okay, and yeah, there's a lot of links going up right now. Shelly did put up the link for Moko Janso. That's available there. Linda D, again, with that webinar calendar.
And you're always welcome if you want to look for something. If you come to salinaspubliclibrary.org, if you go to the calendar, the calendar displays a month at a time. You can find the date, and you'll find the link, or you'll be able to click on what the item is and go to its page. Since we had so many people signed up for the class today, we got all 3 calendar listings on there, not all the details in place, but the Zoom registration link is there for each of the classes. It's not pretty yet, but it's done. It's a little ahead of when we usually do it, but I didn't want to miss the chance for folks. I also wanted to mention we have, if you're local to the Salinas area, and if you're not local, you could probably still join us while we're virtual. We have a monthly meeting of the Genealogy Work Group, which is essentially a support group for folks. So if you're, it can be very lonely doing your own genealogy, and the Genealogy Work Group meets the 4th Tuesday of every month at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And we're continuing to meet virtually right now. And it has the group, we have anywhere from 5 or 6 people to 15 or more people, depending on the month. We talk about things of interest to the people who are attending. Each month's group picks out what our focus might be for the next month. I know this month for April, people are bringing examples of some brick walls they ran into, and we'll do very concise, short presentations so that other group members can give ideas and suggestions. Other times we've talked about the census, we've talked about other kinds of resources. So you're welcome to join us. It's a repeating Zoom link. You don't have to register for it, but the link you can contact me directly. You can also, again, if you look at the website and the calendar and the 4th Tuesday, then you'll see more information about that. But you're all welcome. Anyone who'd like to attend is welcome to attend that. If you want to reach out to me, the city's email address, my name's Kathy, but it's Kathleen A at ci.salinas.ca.us. I put it into chat, so it's there for you. And you're welcome to drop me an email with a question or a comment or a, next week when you can't find the link you wrote down and you want to find out how to get registered, please feel free to reach out. All right, are there any other questions? Anybody want to break radio silence and ask a question out loud, or have we pretty much covered what we're going to cover tonight?
Okay, I think that's about it then.
Very good. Folks, I thank you very much for attending. I hope to come back for some of the other classes or let your friends know. And I'll look forward to seeing you again. Again, please feel free to reach out if there's a way that I can be of assistance.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you
bye.
very much.
Thank you.